Deep beneath the surface of the Atacama desert, 33 miners were hard at work, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. Suddenly the ground shook and the tunnels collapsed, trapping them nearly 700 meters underground. With limited food and water and no way to communicate with the outside world, their situation seemed hopeless. As days turned into weeks, the world watched in suspense, hoping for a miracle. This is the heart-wrenching story of the Copiapo mining accident. Chile, the world's top copper producer, has seen an average of 34 mining deaths per year since 2000, with a peak of 43 in 2008, according to the National Geology and Mining Service. The San José mine, a copper-gold mine in the Atacama desert, has a history of accidents, including a fatal explosion in 2007. Owned by the San Esteban Mining Company, known for unsafe operations, the mine saw 8 worker deaths and was fined 42 times between 2004 and 2010. Despite non-compliance and safety warnings, it reopened in 2008 after a temporary 2007 shutdown. The disaster began on a day shift around lunchtime at a mine in Chile's Atacama desert. Miners working deep inside a mountain, excavating for copper, gold and other minerals, started feeling vibrations. Suddenly there was a massive explosion and the passageways of the mine filled up with a gritty dust cloud. When the dust settled, the men discovered the source of the explosion. A single block of stone as tall as a 45-story building had broken off from the rest of the mountain and had fallen through the layers of the mine, causing a chain reaction as the mountain above it began collapsing too. 33 miners were sealed inside the mountain by this mega block of stone, some 770,000 tons of it, twice the weight of the Empire State Building. Luis Ochoa, the shift supervisor, gathered his men in a room called a refuge and organized them and their resources. Once news of the collapse spread, the Chilean government and rescue teams sprang into action. However, the rescue mission was far from easy. The mine was old and unstable, and any attempt to reach the miners risked triggering further collapses. Chile's President Sebastián Piñera cut short an official trip to Colombia and returned to Chile in order to visit the mine. At first, relatives gathered at the mine entrance and slept in cars as they waited and prayed for word on the rescue operation's progress. As days turned into weeks, friends brought them tents and other camping supplies to provide shelter from the harsh desert climate. "We're not going to abandon this camp until we go out with the last miner left," said Maria Segovia. "There are 33 of them, and one is my brother." Exploratory boreholes about 16 centimeters in diameter were drilled in an attempt to find the miners. Out-of-date mineshaft maps complicated rescue efforts, and several boreholes drifted off target due to drilling depth and hard rock. On 19th August, one of the probes reached a space where the miners were believed to be trapped, but found no signs of life. For the first 17 days, there was no sign of life. Families camped outside the mine, praying and waiting for any news. The government declared that they would do everything in their power to save the miners, but as days passed with no contact, hope began to fade. Life underground was extremely difficult for the miners. The temperature inside the mine reached around 90 degrees, and humidity was high. The miners had to organize themselves, rationing supplies and maintaining their mental health. As days turned into weeks, the miners faced an increasingly grim reality. Their food supplies were dwindling to almost nothing, forcing them to ration every morsel. With each passing day, their energy drained, and physical exhaustion began to take its toll. The once strong men now found themselves battling hunger, fatigue, and the psychological strain of isolation, yet they clung to hope, knowing their survival depended on it. The trapped miners' emergency shelter had an area of 50 square meters with 2 long benches, but ventilation problems had led them to move out into a tunnel. In addition to the shelter, they had access to some 2 kilometers of open tunnels in which they could move around and get some exercise or privacy. Food supplies were severely limited, and each of the men had lost an average of 8 kilograms by the time they were discovered. Although the emergency supplies stocked in the shelter were intended to last only 2 or 3 days, through careful rationing, the men made their meager resources last for 2 weeks, only running out just before they were discovered. The 8th borehole broke through at a depth of 688 meters, at a ramp near the shelter where the miners had taken refuge. For days the miners had heard drills approaching and had prepared notes, which they attached to the tip of the drill with insulation tape when it poked into their space. They also tapped on the drill before it was withdrawn, and these taps could be heard on the surface. When the drill was withdrawn, a note was attached to it. "All 33 of us are fine in the shelter." The words became the motto of the miners' survival and the rescue effort, and appeared on websites, banners and t-shirts. Hours later, video cameras sent down the borehole captured the first grainy, black and white, silent images of the miners. Shortly after their discovery, 28 of the 33 miners appeared in a 40-minute video recorded using a mini camera delivered by the government via 1.5-meter long blue plastic capsules called Palomas. The footage showed most of the men in good spirits and reasonably healthy, though they had all lost weight. The men appeared mainly bare-chested and bearded. They were all covered with a sheen of sweat due to the high heat and humidity of the mine at that depth. Several of the miners looked very thin, and some were camera-shy. On 23rd August, the first voice contact was made with the miners. Doctors reported that the miners had been provided with a 5% glucose solution and a drug to prevent stomach ulcers caused by food deprivation. Material was sent down the mine in Palomas, which took an hour to reach the miners. Delivery of solid food began a few days later. Relatives were permitted to write letters, but were asked to keep them optimistic. Out of concern for their morale, rescuers were reluctant to tell the miners that in the worst-case scenario, the rescue might take months, with an eventual extraction date close to Christmas. Once the miners were found alive, the focus shifted to how they could be rescued. The challenge was immense. The miners were trapped nearly half a mile underground, and the unstable condition of the mine meant traditional rescue methods were too dangerous. Engineers from around the world, including experts from NASA, joined forces to devise a plan. When rescuers finally established communication with the trapped miners, a crucial part of the rescue plan involved asking them to assist in clearing the path to their own escape. Rescuers suggested the miners use controlled explosions from within the mine. The goal was to help clear away large amounts of rock and debris, creating a more direct and accessible path for the drills being used from the surface. By strategically setting off these smaller blasts, the miners could weaken tough rock formations that were slowing down the progress of the rescue efforts. Although it was a dangerous task, the controlled explosions would speed up the operation, making it easier for rescue shafts to break through and reach the men more quickly, bringing them one step closer to freedom. 3 different rescue plans were put into action simultaneously, with the goal of creating a shaft wide enough to pull the miners out one by one. 3 large escape boreholes were drilled concurrently using several types of equipment provided by multiple international corporations and based on 3 different access strategies. This shaft had to be drilled carefully to avoid causing another collapse. While the world waited, the miners continued to survive on the food and supplies sent through the borehole, and they prepared themselves for what would be a long and difficult journey to freedom. While the 3 drilling operations progressed, technicians worked on building the rescue capsules that would eventually carry the miners to safety.
Rescuers plan to bring up the miners in a tiny capsule just a bit wider than the average man's shoulders.
Several media organizations produced illustrations of the capsule's basic design. The steel rescue capsules Phoenix were constructed by the Chilean shipbuilding company Estileros y Maestranzas de la Armada, with design input from NASA. The rescue effort to retrieve the miners began on Tuesday, 12th October at 19 CLT. After more than 2 months underground, the day of rescue finally arrived on October 13, 2010. A capsule called Phoenix was designed to fit through the rescue shaft and safely carry the miners to the surface. The rescue operation was broadcast live on television, and millions of people around the world watched anxiously. One by one, the miners were lifted to safety. Florencio Avalos was the first to emerge, greeted by cheers and applause from the crowd and his tearful family. Each miner was checked by medical staff before being reunited with their families. The final miner to be rescued was Luis Ursua, the shift leader, who had been instrumental in keeping the group organized and hopeful during their ordeal. The rescue operation, which lasted more than 24 hours, was a complete success. All 33 miners were rescued alive, and the world celebrated their incredible survival story. The miners were hailed as heroes, and their resilience became a symbol of hope and perseverance.
On our broadcast tonight, one by one, the miners trapped for 2 months are brought to freedom in a rescue mission the whole world is watching, while on the surface, the tears and cheers and joyful reunion.
That's it for today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more related content.